A very good morning to all the students of class 5. Dear student, today we will study the 14th chapter of social science named as the First War of Independence. Dear student, we will study this chapter from the book Our Land, Our World, a book of social science. So, dear student, let's start with the chapter 14, which is the first war of independence. Dear student, as you all know, very first we should know that what are the learning objectives of this chapter, what you will learn in this chapter. So as you can see in my screen, so these are the learning objective of this chapter. So, in the first, we will learn about the advent of British to India. In the second, we will learn about the British in Bengal. In the third, we will learn about extension of British Empire. In the fourth, we will learn about separation of Indian. In the last, we will learn about the First War of Independence. So, dear student, let's begin the chapter. So, dear student, many centuries ago, Indian goods such as cotton, silk, handicraft, and spices were highly popular in other countries. The foreign traders used to come to India for purchasing these goods. बहुत साल पहले बच्चों हमारी कंट्री का, हमारे इंडिया का कॉटन, सिल्क, हैंडीक्राफ्ट, मसाले, बहुत सारी और भी चीज फेमस थी जिसको फॉरेन ट्रेडर्स इंडिया में लेने के लिए आते थे. So the Arabs, Greek and Romans had been trading with India over sea and land for centuries. So they sold Indian goods in European market. Indian goods को वो कहाँ बेचते थे? जो ट्रेड्स करने आते थे अरब, ग्रीक्स, रोमन से जो ट्रेड करने आते थे वो इंटरनेशनल मार्केट में, यूरोपियन मार्केट में उसे बेचते थे. Nearly 500 years ago, the West European countries also decided to make profit from such a trade. The Portuguese were the first among the Europeans to reach India. Dear student, this is very important that you should know who was the first to reach India. So the Portuguese were the first among the European. Who is the first European to reach first India? So the Portuguese were the first among the European to reach India. Dear student, as you can see in my screen, this is the pictorial part of Vasco da Gama. Let's understand who is Vasco da Gama. This is the pictorial part of Vasco da Gama. So, dear student, as I am again highlighting it, in 1498, a Portuguese sailor Vasco da Gama discovered a new and all sea route from Europe to India by Cape of Good Hope. तो वास्को डी गामा कब आए थे इंडिया? 1498 में आए थे, जो एक पुर्तगीज सेलर थे. सो ही लैंडेड एट कालीकट. वो कहाँ पर उतरे थे? कालीकट में उतरे थे. इट इज अ सी पोर्ट इन केरला, जो एक सी पोर्ट है. कहाँ का? केरला का. A state well known for its spices. The king of Calicut allowed them to trade. Soon they fought against and drove away Arab traders. So the Portuguese trader became very rich in no time. They established absolute control over Indian trade carried along the sea routes. They also tried to make local people followed their religion. So gradually the Portuguese incited the rulers of small kingdom to fight among themselves. So Then they helped one king to defeat another. In this way, they extracted wealth and made themselves very powerful. So, let's understand the first learning objective of the chapter. That is the advent of British to India. Let's understand it. So, for nearly 100 years ago, the Portuguese had a monopoly in their trade with India. Then Dutch, French and British also came to India. तो पुर्तगीज के बाद कौन आए? डच आए, फ्रेंच आए, ब्रिटिशर्स इंडिया में आए. They established their trading centers in India. उन्होंने इंडिया में अपने trading centers open किए. They built forts and maintained armies to protect their godowns. Soon they fought with each other. Finally, the British proved the most powerful. उन सब की आपस में लड़ाई हुई, जिसके बाद ब्रिटिश सबसे ज्यादा, जो ब्रिटिशर्स थे वो सबसे ज्यादा पावरफुल प्रूफ हुए. They drove away everywhere European power. Surat was the most prosperous port of international trade at that time. The British established their center at Surat, Mumbai, Chennai and Kolkata. They named their company as the East India Company. Dear student, this is very important question. Why Britishers named their company as East India Company? So let's understand the next learning objective of the chapter. I'm so sorry. The British established centers at where this is very important question, where Britishers established their centers. So in Surat, Mumbai and Chennai they established their centers, and their name was East India Company. They called their companies as East India Company. So let's understand the next learning objective of the chapter, which is the British in Bengal. Let's understand it. So, Sirajud-Dowla was the young Nawab of Bengal in those days. He did not like the British traders building forts and raising their own armies. He ordered them to remove their guns from their fort at Kolkata. When they refused, the Nawab attacked and captured their fort. Later, Mir Jafar, a general in Nawab's army, joined British. They attacked the Nawab with great army. This battle fought at Plassey in 1757. The Nawab lost the battle and the British became very powerful in Bengal. So, dear student, ये बहुत important question है कि प्लासी का जो युद्ध था वो कब हुआ था. So, the Plassey battle fought in 1757 between Nawab and Britishers. So, let's understand the next learning objective of the chapter, which is extension of British Empire. So, let's understand it. So, the British trained Indian soldiers and employed them in their army. During this time, there were many quarrels among the Indian states. In most of these disputes, the British were asked for help by one of the states, or they involved themselves on their own if they saw any advantage. They helped one king against another and in return gained more power and wealth. The British army were far better trained, disciplined and armed with modern weapons than the armies of small kings. तो जो ब्रिटिश की आर्मी थी वो बहुत ही वेल ट्रेन थी, डिसिप्लिन थी और उनके पास बहुत ही मॉडर्न तरीके के वेपन्स थे जो हमारे कंट्री के छोटे छोटे राजाओं में नहीं थे, उनके पास नहीं थे. Gradually the British captured and ruled over very large part of India. तो इस पावर के साथ ब्रिटिशर्स ने इंडिया के बहुत सारी जगहों पर को कैप्चर कर लिया, हड़प लिया. Besides, they made treaties with king who accepted them supreme. There also the British rule. The king were ruler only for name's sake. So, dear student, let's understand the next learning objective of the chapter, which is separation of Indians. So, let's understand it. So, let's understand separation of Indians. Dear student, as I am highlighting it, the British exploited all the resources of India. They collected huge wealth from the people and the rulers. In Bihar, they compelled the farmers to grow indigo, a color used in England for dyeing mill cloth. They were then forced to sell it only to British traders at a very low price. They were not allowed to grow grains. Thus, the Indian farmers became poorer and poorer. So, weavers of fine cotton and silk were compelled to sell their cloths only to Britishers traders at very low price. The British did not permit Indians to open their own mills and factories. The Indian traders could not trade in articles of their choice. तो ब्रिटिशर्स ने जो था इंडियन फार्मर्स पे बहुत ही गंदा अत्याचार कर रखा था. वो और किसी को भी मिल स्टेब्लिश नहीं करने देते थे. बहुत ही कम प्राइस पे इंडियन फार्मर से उनके गुड्स को खरीदते थे. So, the wealth of India was utilized in setting up big industries in England. The Industrial Revolution in England proved a curse for Indian cottage industry. So, the British started very big cotton textile mills in England. So, England being a cold country could not grow cotton. So, cotton was purchased from India at very low price and sent to England by ship. तो जो इंग्लैंड थी वो बहुत ही ठंडी कंट्री थी, वो जिससे वहां पे कॉटन नहीं हो सकता था, पैदा नहीं हो सकता था, वो इंडिया से लेते थे और बहुत ही कम प्राइस पे लेते थे और जाके शिप के थ्रू उसे इंग्लैंड में बेचते थे, वहां भेजते थे. In return, the same ship brought back large quantity of cloth to be sold in India. जब वो शिप वापस आते थे तो उसमें बहुत ही large quantities में कपड़े आते थे जो इंडिया में बेचे जाते थे. As a result, the big weavers class in India became unemployed. People had to buy British cloth at a much higher price. In the same way, the other cottage industry suffered a lot. The British made laws through which they could take over the kingdom of so-called king. So, dear student, let's move ahead to understand more. So, if any king died without a child, his kingdom was taken over by the British. So, the king had no power to make treaties and friendship among themselves. The British used Indian soldiers to conquer India, but they treated them very badly. There were great disparity between Indian and European soldiers. So, many armies were dismissed when states were taken from Indian princes. Thus, many Indian soldiers lost their job. So, dear student, this is all about separation of Indians. Let's understand the last learning objective of the chapter, which is the first war of independence. Let's understand it. So, as I am highlighting it, thus the farmers, weavers, traders, king, nawabs and soldiers all were unhappy, discontent with the British rule. So, from time to time, people expressed their discontent, but it was never at the same time and all over the country. The first war of independence was called revolt. जो फर्स्ट वॉर था इंडिपेंडेंस के लिए उसे किसका नाम दिया गया? रिवोल्ट का नाम दिया गया बाय द ब्रिटिश. As it was started by the Indian soldiers, serving in British Army itself. But persons from every walk of life fought against the British rule in India. So let's understand more about it. So, dear student, the Indian soldiers were denied a higher position in spite of their ability. The European officer treated them with hatred and contempt. This created hatred the British officer in the Indian army. The Indian soldier felt very badly offended when they were given greased cartridges to use. These cartridges were smeared with with the fat of cows and pigs. This was offensive to the religious sentiments of both Hindus and Muslim soldiers. This provided immediate cause of starting of the war. The soldiers refused to obey their officers. The first spark of the war was started at Meerut on 9th May 1857. Dear student, this is very important question. When did the first spark of the revolt started? So the first spark of the war started on 9th May 1847. From where it is started? It is started from Meerut. So, Three Indian soldiers shot down their officer, broke upon the prisons and set free their imprisoned fellow soldiers. One battalion of the British Army openly revolted against the British rule. In no time, the war spread over the large parts of northern and central India. Other sections of the society also joined the war. They declared Mughal Emperor Bahadur Shah Jafar their leader. Some other leaders led the struggle in their own areas. Some of them were Nana Sahib Peshwa, Tatya Tope, Kanwar Singh and Liaquat Ali, two brave women, Rani Lakshmi Bai of Jhansi and Begum Hazrat Mahal of Awadh, fought gloriously at the head of the army. तो रानी लक्ष्मीबाई ने, दो बहुत पावरफुल वुमेन, रानी लक्ष्मीबाई ने इस युद्ध को झांसी से लड़ा, बेगम हजरत महल ने इस युद्ध को अवध से लड़ा. So the Hindu and Muslim fought soldiers to soldier against the British. हिंदू ने, मुस्लिम्स ने ब्रिटिश के अगेंस्ट इस लड़ाई को लड़ा. But they had many leaders, so they were not able to fight as a unity. So the British had a well-organized army. They gathered their army and attacked back. तो इन सभी ने अपनी अपनी जगह से लड़ाई की ब्रिटिश के अगेंस्ट, बट जो ब्रिटिश की आर्मी थी वो बहुत ही वेल ऑर्गेनाइज्ड आर्मी थी. तो इस लड़ाई में क्या हुआ? Their cruelty knew no limits. These two sons, Bahadur Shah Jafar, were killed. Their heads were presented to him. The emperor was arrested and kept in the prisons in Burma, which is also named as Myanmar. Many villages were burned down. Hundreds of people were tied and blasted to the pieces. Thousands were hanged, but the urge to be free could not suppress. The immediate result of the war was India came even more firmly under the British. The East India Company came to an end. So the British government took over India under its rule. A governor general or viceroy. The king representative was appointed to rule India. Governor general, viceroy को king को इंडिया के पे राज करने के लिए चुना गया. So the Indian princes were permitted to rule their territories, but in effect, they were completely under the authority of British ruler. राजा तो इंडिया का होता था, इंडियन प्रिंस होता था, लेकिन उस पे जो पूरा राइट होता था वो ब्रिटिश गवर्नमेंट का होता था. ब्रिटिश गवर्नमेंट के बिना परमिशन के वो कोई भी काम नहीं कर सकते थे. सो the British traders were replaced by the British government officer. They continued the harsh and suppressed the Indian people. The first war of independence was a landmark in our struggle of freedom. It was a failure, but it is a flame in the mind of Indian and urge for freedom. The more British tried to suppress this urge, the stronger it became. The Indian continued struggle for freedom in one or the other way, which led to the freedom in 1947. तो काफी लड़ाइयाँ हुई फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड वॉर के बाद भी, और लास्ट में इन 1947 इंडिया को ब्रिटिश से आजादी मिली. So, dear student, as I am removing it, so this is the end of the chapter. So, dear student, this is all about the first war of independence, which is 14th chapter. We will study the 15th chapter in our next class. Thank you.